So the 2025 offseason had some exciting moments, with the real impactful moves being KD getting traded to Houston in a revamped offense for the Rockets, Desmond Bane getting traded to the Magic that are in desperate need of three-point shooting and spacing, and offensive creation outside of Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner, with Desmond Bane also providing value as a good defender, as well as a few playoff contenders boosting their rosters, like the Clippers getting Chris Paul, Bradley Beal, and John Collins, and the Denver Nuggets gaining an improved supporting cast around Jokic and Jamal Murray, with players like Cam Johnson, Tim Hardaway Jr., Jonas Valanciunas, and a familiar face for the Nuggets and their fans in Bruce Brown. Though one area of free agency that hasn't really gained any traction so far is the restricted free agents, as some of the players from the 2021 draft class, Josh Giddey, Jonathan Kuminga, and Quentin Grimes, are all looking for big deals for around $30 million or more per year that their respective teams aren't willing to give out. And the player I wanted to talk about is Cam Thomas, that's had a rough valuation of his game shown in these past few weeks that can maybe cost him millions. But first, to quickly talk about restricted free agency for people who don't know. It's a way for a player's original team to have the right to match any offer sheet they may accept from rival teams, specifically for players whose rookie contract is expired so far. For example, if Cam Thomas were to accept a new contract for another team, then the original team, the Brooklyn Nets, would have the chance to match that contract offer, which most teams do in those cases. And this makes it harder for restricted free agents to get real offers from rival teams, knowing that their original team will most likely match it. Though Cam is the most intriguing player left in free agency, why are the Brooklyn Nets unwilling to pay for Thomas, or any other team at least trying to do a sign and trade to prevent the Nets from matching an offer sheet? This is mostly because of his play style coming into the league, as well as his shooting splits recently with the Nets, as though he's one of the most exciting players to watch as a scorer and makes difficult shots on a nightly basis. He just isn't that efficient doing it. And with also being a subpar defender, a smaller size shooting guard limiting his versatility on defense, as well as a low assist average compared to his usage, this really lowers the value of Cam Thomas and really makes people question if he could be a winning player. But another factor that hasn't helped him is the roster that he had this past season. Matter of fact, his whole career in Brooklyn. Starting in his rookie and sophomore seasons, Thomas was barely in the rotation for the Nets due to the situation of the Big Three at the time in Brooklyn, with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, and their situation in Brooklyn, as it would get messier when Harden would get traded in Cam's rookie season, then Durant and Kyrie later getting traded in Cam's sophomore season. Cam did show his scoring potential, having a season high of 30 points in his rookie season, then erupting for more than 40 points in his sophomore season 4 times, including 3 straight games around the same time where KD and Kyrie would get traded. And after that 3-game streak of scoring 40 points or more, he would then start the next game and finish with 20 points. Still, after those games, his minutes were all over the place in the second half, serving more as a 6th man when he got playing time. And in that time, he had averaged 8 points per game coming off the bench. Now in years 3 and 4, he'd actually have more of an opportunity to show what he could do as a high volume scorer, and he would average 22 and 24 points respectively, but both years ended in losing seasons. And a big part of those seasons is due to the lack of direction from the Nets front office, as they still seem that they can compete with all the assets they gained from trading the Big Three in Harden, Irving, and Durant. This is where some of the downsides of Cam Thomas can be attributed, first to his inefficient shooting, as the Nets roster was nothing but disappointing talent-wise for the past 2 seasons, featuring mostly low to high level role players, the biggest name being Mikal Bridges, who was inefficient in his only full season in Brooklyn back in 2024. This is also due to the load that Bridges had to carry, both offensively as a top option beside Cam Thomas, as well as defensively guarding the best players every game. Now, to focus on Cam, this is relevant to show just how bad his teams were those years, as the Nets were really just pushing high-level starters into roles that didn't fit them. with the Nets becoming a team that offensively couldn't create plays outside of Cam Thomas and that couldn't finish plays efficiently as well. And with teams knowing this, it made it so much easier to guard the Nets, as the opposing defense could help and double Cam Thomas, knowing the rest of his teammates couldn't score efficiently to become threats. So the third year was bad for Cam Thomas efficiency wise, but the fourth year got even worse because there was even more defensive attention around him, with Bridges getting traded in the offseason. And really all he had left as a consistent scorer was Cam Johnson and half a season of D'Angelo Russell. And the constant defensive pressure for Cam Thomas was shown in a stat where it showed him being the most doubled player in the 2025 season, meaning that no shot was really easy for Cam, as the game plan was very simple for defenses: either double Cam into tougher shots or simply just get the ball out of his hands. And this would hurt Cam's development as an offensive player, as one of his first big problems in his career was passing, or the willingness to pass, as one big note from his first head coach Steve Nash, saying that he had to get his teammates more involved and really mix his ISO plays with ball movement. Though with Cam Thomas's scoring mindset in the first 2 years, it really looked like he wasn't trying to hear all that.
I was talking to your head coach, Steve Nash, before the game, and he was saying he's encouraging you both to look for your shot, but to look for your teammates as well. You had 7 assists. You laughed there. Why are we laughing?
It is what it is.
But if you watch Cam Thomas, you could actually see that he did improve his willingness to pass as well as his playmaking ability and actually playing within the offense. But it still goes back to the number one problem, is that the Nets were just a rebuilding team and didn't have the pieces to really create or finish any plays that Cam Thomas created. And now when it comes to Cam Thomas and his career as a Net so far, it really has been him just not being the priority no matter what he does on the court. And being drafted there specifically for his upside as a scoring guard, I can bet the Nets didn't really envision him to become the starter caliber player he is today. Again, with the Nets drafting Cam Thomas 27th overall in the 2021 draft, the Nets seen Cam Thomas as a low-risk, high-reward type of player that at best could be dynamic enough off the bench to be a great six-man. And you could tell from Cam's career so far that he hasn't been a priority for the Nets, with his first 2 years being with the big three, with James Harden, KD, and Kyrie, as well as the final 2 years really just being a part of their rebuild, and now them having another strange solo project with Michael Porter Jr. So what I've seen from Cam Thomas is that he's always been a talented scorer that's recently been trying to improve part of his game offensively as a playmaker, though that can't be said for him defensively. Though we don't know the full potential of what Cam Thomas can do offensively with the right team alongside him, it's very clear that him staying in Brooklyn also won't help his potential either. So with all that being said, is it worth taking a chance on building around Cam Thomas? I'd say there's definitely still a decent risk to building around Thomas just because of the sample size we've seen so far. But I would say one of the biggest factors into the risk of Cam Thomas is how the NBA is slowly moving away from his play style. Before, there was many different levels of high volume scorers in the NBA, from superstars to perennial all-stars and even a few high-level starters. But now for these offensive players to have a similar shot selection as Cam Thomas, you have to be a superstar, meaning scoring efficiently while being a good passer and not being a negative on defense. Again, Thomas wasn't really able to improve too much as a passer, as I explained earlier, as well as really improving defensively, whether individually or as a team defender. Also, another factor that plays into Cam Thomas's risk as a top option is his size for a shooting guard. He's undersized at 6'4", and one of the most valuable traits in the NBA is versatility, not only defensively being able to guard multiple positions, but offensively too, making it easier for an offensive player when challenged by a variety of defenders, as well as knowing the small percentages of guards to actually be reliable top offensive options in the regular season and especially in the playoffs. And if we were to look into recent memory, the risk was already taken by a couple of teams, and I think it's a good comparison of a possible future for Cam Thomas being Jordan Poole and Jalen Green, with both Green and Poole starting this upcoming season on new teams because their original teams believed they could be top options despite their weaknesses. which ended up not working out for Jalen Green and the Rockets, as well as Jordan Poole and the Wizards. Though both players lacked being consistent primary players while still being bad defenders at shooting guard, first with Jordan Poole being traded from a great system set in place for him at Golden State to a dysfunctional Wizards team, and then for Jalen Green having the green light from day one, but never really making the big leap that people thought he could make for years, only making small developments as a playmaker and defender in his first 4 years. So when relating this back to Cam Thomas, both these players in Jordan Poole and Jalen Green had very good opportunities to get these first contracts because first with Jordan Poole, his great performance when Curry was out during the Warriors championship run in 2022, as well as Jalen Green having some streaks of dominance in his time in Houston, but also being a high priority for the Houston Rockets due to where he was drafted at number 2. And this is where the differences really start for Cam Thomas, as first he was never really in a great system like Jordan Poole, nor had the priority like Jalen Green to make mistakes in his first few years, and this really shows how he's the biggest wild card out of all the previous mentioned restricted free agents. So overall, I like Cam Thomas as a player, but him pushing to be a top option with all the weaknesses that I mentioned earlier makes it very hard for any team to fully commit to him. My ideal role for him, ironically enough, would be in a similar role to what his potential new teammate in Brooklyn, Michael Porter Jr. had in Denver, to try and see how good he could play in a system with better players that can fit his type of offense and vice versa. Though I also see him being a great 6-man off the bench that could really score in bunches, but I definitely can see why that wouldn't be an option for Cam Thomas, as I think this is too early in his career to settle for a lesser role, and he definitely still has the potential to become a high-level starter or even a star in this league. Though Cam Thomas has the biggest question out of all restricted free agents, they all have a similar problem, and that's the reason why they're not signed yet, which is first, them lacking the defensive versatility or them being one-dimensional offensively, whether their big glaring weakness being shooting, passing, or ball handling. And this makes it harder for teams to take a chance on players like this and giving them a bag to stay and see if they can improve their game. So I think with Cam Thomas and the rest of the restricted free agents, I think it's unrealistic at this point to expect the amount of money that they're asking for, but not specifically because of their game given that they're still young and have potential, but more because of how the league values their play style given their efficiency. And I think this trend will continue in the future for more one-dimensional offensive players, as well as just really talented offensive players with no defense. Their value is going to continue to go down, and you're going to see more of these teams in the future kind of just putting them in a certain role on the bench or just as a really good 6-man that could score off the bench. For example, role players like Obi Toppin that could come in and score and just bring a lot of energy off the bench, as well as Peyton Pritchard that plays a specific role of being a 3-point shooter. But I also want to hear what you guys think. Do you think these teams are wrong about any of the restricted free agents, whether it be Cam Thomas, Josh Giddey, Kuminga, or Quentin Grimes? Are they wrong about their potential and they could actually become high quality starters or stars in the league, or really anybody that's really being underrated in this league that's being undervalued? So let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.